Howdy! This is part 2 of the Animal Crossing Iceberg. Finally completed and with the proper visual assets edited in. Brought to you by Clean Casual. Enjoy! Level 6, Bottom of the Iceberg. 43. Gyroids are soul jars, gyroid face curse, player is an empty vessel. The gyroids are not just the souls of beings long ago, but soul jars that are utilized in the Animal Crossing world. Could the souls inhabiting villagers such as Sprocket, Ribbot, or Dell be from gyroids? The robotic villagers are either artificial constructs imbued with a soul, coded to exhibit a personality and given prepper AI capabilities, or is a former living creature that was slowly transformed from cyborg to true robot by some unnamed entity. One particularly curious gyroid set is that of the Brewster-based gyroids. Brewster is the cafe pigeon and not a robot upon brief visual glance. What if all of the animals, and not just the robotic or seemingly non-biological villagers, were bodies taken over by the souls trapped within these gyroid soul jars? Why are there multiple? Let's shift gears for a moment. There is a well-known Easter egg known as the gyroid face curse. Quote, if a player takes the in-game train to the town of another player online, resets the game cube while in the other player's town, and starts up the game again, the player will lose all the items they had in their inventory at the time, and their avatar's face will be replaced with that of the gyroid statue, complete with empty eye sockets and gaping circular mouth. This is a deliberate Easter egg programmed in by Nintendo. End quote. This is, however, only present in the GameCube game. Coco, on the other hand, is a longtime villager that also sports the gaping maw and sockets of a gyroid. Coco's Japanese name, Yayoi, is a reference to the Yayoi period 300 BC to AD 300 in Japan, an era near the end of which Haniwa statues were first created. She also sports a very similar texture to gyroids, like Lloyd. Could this and the intentional Easter egg be a phase of the conversion process from gyroid to villager, taking over the body and consciousness of the hapless villager? Or is it the process from villager to gyroid, inexplicably buried until they are found once more? 44. 3:33 a.m. 3:33 a.m. is sometimes called the witching hour. Many people report the odd habit of inexplicably waking up within this time frame. Generally speaking, the time between 3 to 4 a.m. is the overall witching hour or devil's hour, associated with supernatural events wherein witches, demons, and ghosts are thought to be their most powerful. It is also known to be associated with a phenomenon known as luck. How curious then that the Animal Crossing world features ghosts, demons, or spirits known as yokai, a good and bad luck system, among many other mysteries. 333 itself also has some apparent spiritual or paranormal connections, and is sometimes called, quote, the angel number, end quote, that can indicate that a person is on the correct path, despite their fears, insecurities, or anxieties. In New Leaf and New Horizons, if you tune in at 3:33 a.m. on your TV on the right day, you will catch what appears to be an alien broadcast interrupting the regular programming. In New Leaf, you can see this on Sunday and Monday night, or rather, the morning. And on New Horizons, you can see it on Saturdays. The alien figure speaks incoherently for the full minute, then the broadcast stops. Are the aliens trying to communicate with us? Or are they trying to communicate with each other while we're asleep? With the vague references to aliens that keep appearing in the games, it has to be asked, how significant are the aliens to the series, and have they had a hand in the other paranormal activities taking place? 45. 7 p.m. Music Negative Aura. Mostly in regards to New Leaf, fans tend to think this song is either relaxing or depressing and unnerving, for mostly unexplainable reasons. In New Leaf, the tone has contrasting sound effects, echoing ticks, and what sounds like soft, fuzzy, distorted bass that comes across as unnatural. and New Horizons, the tone shifts to a slower, almost smooth jazz-like sound as it drags and shifts from a major to a minor key. Minor keys are normally utilized in sad, dreary, or what one might define as creepy music. This is where the shift from day to night begins. Villagers go to sleep, painting and statues blink and glow, ghosts appear, and the world slows down and quietens. Similar to the horror town Ica Village, where this song is also featured, the aura of the uncertain, the unknown, is prevalent. 46. Gulliver is a traveler's ghost. Gulliver, the sailor seagull, constantly washes up on the shore of New Horizons and is potentially the ghost of the seafaring seagull sailor. He has fallen over and washed ashore, alive countless times, seemingly no worse for wear. In colder waters, many people die from exposure, although, given the tropical nature of the island, the winter months notwithstanding, with Gulliver's anatomy as a seagull, perhaps he would have more of a chance. Then again, Gulliver breathes air, and without a life jacket, would have no means of keeping himself afloat and above water. While not wholly impossible for a single miracle in him being stranded once, the various other times seem unlikely. In his sleep, he comments, "Who's at the helm?" and "Check its blood pressure," among many other things that, while may seem kooky, nautical, or random, could belie a sadder tale. Were Gulliver and his shipmates distracted by something, a mermaid or other unknown entity, pulling their attention away from the helm, leading to the boat crashing? His pirate alter ego, or ancestor, Gullivar, mentioned the good soda or alcohol he consumed before falling over. Could Gulliver have imbibed a similar drink with his compatriots, leading him too to fall over and drown? Perhaps he constantly repeats the events of his death, unable to accept that he is in fact dead and is merely washed ashore and needs to get back to his shipmates. If he eventually does accept his fate, would he be able to pass on to the next life? 47. Black Skybox. A skybox is, essentially, a method for creating backgrounds for a video game that make it seem bigger than it really is. For example, if you head to the back of the island in New Horizons, we can see what appears to be endless ocean with a few greenish blurs that we assume to be other islands. The screen or world does not actually go out that far, but the forged perspective makes it seem like the in-game world is far bigger than it really is. However, walk into a building and the skybox is black, as if the building exists in a dark abyss outside of the world and the time. Why not show the inside of the house as well as the world immediately surrounding it within view? Does going inside of a building teleport the inhabitants into an isolated sphere or void? 48. Wisp's Master. Wisp is the friendly and cowardly spirit or ghost character in the Animal Crossing series. The player is normally tasked with aiding him in the retrieval of certain objects, such as pieces of his own spirit. He mentions in previous games that his master, whose name is normally silly, such as Lord Smartypants, the Giant Lens, the Ghost League, the Big Smelly, the Puppet Master, and so on, will punish him, potentially quite harshly. This seems to suggest that either Wisp is part of a conglomerate of spirits that actively have a presence and impact on the world, that he was perhaps summoned by someone that he must refer to as his master. If so, does he have free will to come and go as he chooses, or is he truly subject to such harsh punishments? Furthermore, why is he in your town or on your island to begin with? Is Wisp what is referred to as a yurei, or the Japanese equivalent of a ghost? According to traditional Japanese beliefs, all humans have a spirit and a soul, called a rekon, and when a person dies, the rekon leaves the body and is entered into a form of purgatory until the ceremonial burial and rites are completed, allowing it to pass on. However, if a person dies in a violent manner, such as murder or suicide, or if the proper rites have not been carried out, or if powerful emotions such as revenge, love, jealousy, hatred, or sorrow occur, the Rekon is believed to transform into a yurei. Now tied to the physical plane, the Eureka will persist until the rites are performed or the conflict and turmoil that led to its deviation is resolved. In fact, the white visage and unique hat Wisp wears bears a marked resemblance to those that Eureka are depicted as wearing. Is this master someone that is trying to help Wisp cross over to the afterlife, which very much appears to exist in this world? Or is his master a more malevolent one, perhaps even the one that caused him to become a Eureka in the first place? The strongest emotion Wisp exudes is fear, which, while powerful, is not mentioned as one of the key binding emotions. Will he ever find forgiveness? 49. Curvature of the planet. The curvature of the Earth is so gradual that most see a relatively flat world before them. However, as Ashley Villar and Alex McCarthy have already done the math for us in their article explaining the horizon and planet of Animal Crossing New Horizons, the calculated diameter of the New Horizons planet is just a mere 73.2 feet, with a circumference of 230 feet. The island itself is 220 feet, 88 squares vertical, and 265 feet, or 106 squares horizontal. And remember those green lumps you see at the back of your island that you assume are other islands in the distance? Based on the curvature, that is most likely the front of your island. However, what about the estimated 15 million islands that players can visit from both mystery tours and other players? As Villar and McCarthy posit, perhaps the Animal Crossing planet is wider, creating a cylindrical tube akin to a solid paper towel roll. Summed up, the planet is 73 feet in one direction and 326 times the radius of our sun in the other direction. 50. Bergsala Summer DS. Bergsala is a Swedish company that distributes Nintendo merchandise and games. This company once held a contest where 2 officially licensed, one-of-a-kind custom DS consoles could be won. These DSs had Animal Crossing-themed designs that were based around a specific season, winter and spring specifically. Both of these DSs were won as prizes by people who still own them to this day, or as far as people know. The odd part is that it appears to be the case that they were a set of 4. Except a contest was only held for 2 of them. An autumn-themed DS console was offhandedly given to a Swedish game store by the Bergsala company, and this one is also well accounted for and still in the possession of the person who took it home. This is weird enough, given the way this rare custom console was just dumped on a random store, but that's only part of the mystery. Given there's a winter, spring, and autumn custom DS, it would seem likely there's also a summer one. But it has never been found, and there's no hint to what Bergsala might have done with it. It appears it just got lost between the cracks, as a form of lost media that might never be found. Various replicas and imitations have been made. Level 7, Under the Iceberg. 51. Uncanny KK Slider. There are several things about KK Slider that make him odd compared to other characters in the game, most of which pertain to his appearance. You might not notice it because he's sitting down with his guitar most of the time, but KK Slider's proportions are different to any other character in the game. To make a chibi-style character look natural sitting down in that position all the time, KK Slider actually has slightly longer limbs and torso, which has the side effect of making him look a little more realistic and normal in comparison to the characters around him. This is typically only noticeable when he is standing up, which he seldom does, and his distinct character design can look unsettling if you are not used to it. The fact that he mostly doesn't wear clothes, as contrasted with the rest of the NPCs, only enhances this effect. The villagers in the GameCube game can comment on the strangeness of his appearance as well, but the way they describe him only raises more questions. They don't talk about his nudity or his relative tallness, but they do talk about his face. Specifically, they'll call KK Slider, quote, dog-faced, which is an odd way to describe someone that is a dog. especially if the person saying it is also a dog or is otherwise neighbors with one. Unless you were to be needlessly redundant, it seems like the only time you would describe a person as dog-faced is when they're comparable to one, but not actually a dog themselves. The theory? Well, it goes like this. KK Slider is actually not a dog, or at least he wasn't always one. Some people seem to think that somehow KK Slider was once a human being who was transformed into a dog, which explains why his proportions are so different to everyone else's, an ability that the terrible secret of Animal Crossing speculates they have. A potential explanation is that the gyroids transformed him into one, since everything points towards KK's condition being unique. 52. Chestnut, Crisp, Blazel, and Beta characters. Crisp, often incorrectly translated from its Japanese form to Chestnut, was a beta special character and female squirrel that was cut from the games, like many other villagers. She is only accessible when using an action replay code and digging through the data of Animal Crossing Forest Plus. Another character cut from the game, Cat 13, named Catty by fans, still had her texture map in the game. She was discovered after a quote giga leak of game files. All of these characters still exist in the game files, suspended between existences and consciousnesses until someone frees them. 53. Club LOL Gyroids. In Club LOL, run by Dr. Shrunk, 4 gyroids can be seen on the stage. The player character is able to swap out these gyroids for their own, arranging these arguably sentient and trapped souls upon the stage for aesthetics. Interestingly, they don't move as much as other gyroids. Instead, they only move 2 times during the songs. The first, when KK makes the place dark, and the second, when the fog machines come on. Perhaps a bit of stage fright? These gyroids seem to prefer the dark, moving when the audience is unable to fully see them. 54. End of time. Is there an end of time for Animal Crossing? Players have tried skipping ahead decades into the future to see if the game wouldn't register the date. For New Horizons, it's still going strong through 2061. That begs the question, is there a limit inputted into the game's code where New Year's would no longer register, perhaps as a result of the game no longer being supported or updated? Think of the New Year's countdown timer. It is programmed to completely sync to the Switch or DS, ultimately culminating with the fireworks showing the actual year date. Is there an algorithm that allows the game to continue showing numbers that may or may not have already been inputted into the game? Or will we eventually arrive at a date so far into the past or future that breaks the game logic and, therefore, the game? Or will the consoles that house the legal copies of the game eventually fall into disrepair, unsupported and left to rot, inaccessible until their cartridges fail or their game files are outdated and no longer optimized by the parent company for use on newer consoles? 55. Beta items. The beta items are, like the beta villagers, unused items and assets never officially incorporated into the Animal Crossing games, and a few of them have some interesting side effects. Found in the original Animal Crossing: A. Bluefish. The bluefish is a beta item in Animal Crossing. It is simply a blue fish with a hook in its lip. Its final use was most likely as a placeholder or default texture, as it is the texture for quite a few invalid item indexes. B. Dummy. When placed in the player's house, it appears as a floating white triangle with red Japanese characters in the center, reading Dummy. As it can be placed as an actual item, it is assumed that it was a substitute item for real furniture during testing of the game. C. Glowing yellow box. Possibly a beta for the lighthouse. It is a yellow cube that shifts from side to side, changing its color to brown and back every once in a while. It can alter where the paper airplane spreads to and can push the player, sometimes causing them to fly and stand on top of the cube. D. Paper airplane. The reasons for its removal are unknown, but the item still remains in a buggy state. When added to the inventory, it acts similar to a piece of paper, giving the player the option to read or write a letter. It is invisible when dropped, but running out of the location it was dropped in and returning causes it to appear. It has the ability to spread and shut down acres. It may spread throughout the entire town, rendering the game unplayable. The areas it spreads to are altered by the glowing yellow box. E. Sickle. When obtained, it can be found in the player's pocket and appears as a net. When equipped, it looks as if the player is holding nothing, as well as acts like they are holding nothing. But on the pocket menu, when the cursor is over the player, the game shows that they are in fact holding it. When dropped, it appears as a toolbox, which appeared in Animal Forest, Wild World, and New Leaf. F. Unknown item. It shows up for most invalid item indexes in the inventory. Certain unknown items can be placed like furniture and show up as the dummy beta item. Now, coming from City Folk. A. The dummy. In the inventory, looks like a standard item, represented as a leaf icon. When dropped, it looks like an apple. In the New Leaf games, A. The following are only seen in the original 2010 screenshots. The cliffs were a lot different, wavier than the actual cliffs. In the dialogue box, the villager's name is written far, far smaller. The players' houses look more like released villager houses than in the final release, and there is no paved exterior bar or a hedge closely fitted to the house. Villager houses are the same as in previous games. Flowers and bushes appear to be a lot more abundant. The following are only seen in the 2011 E3 trailer. Originally, the villager speech boxes were rectangular, rather than cloud-shaped as in the final release. The cobblestone bridge was darker. Rosie's house is more similar to her City Folk house. It evidently hadn't been redesigned yet. The dock was slightly longer and was more of an L-shaped design. Sounds, such as the sound when a tool is equipped or the sound when clothing is changed, were the same as in Animal Crossing City Folk. Trees, flowers, bushes, and other plants had a different shape from the ones in the final release. Finally, in New Horizons, beta rooms for currently unused assets from Museum Art 0, 1, Cafe, and Shop to Museum HUMA, suggesting that all updates will include gyroids, more art, a shop, and a cafe. B. Unseen skybox. Every room has a white skybox around it. These are normally unseen. C. Unused model. If the camera is changed by using hacks, a low-poly desk can be seen inside Dodo Airlines. This cannot be normally seen since it is blocked by the lighting. D. Unseen text. When the player enters the airport, Wilbur is stored out of bounds behind Orville. However, Wilbur can only be seen in the airport when the player goes to someone else's island via local or online play. But if someone hacks the game so they can clip through the walls on another island, then Wilbur says the text stated below. Quote, "Hey, are you the one visiting from Island? Your player name, yeah? I knew it. When I first saw you, I said, I don't know that person. I thought maybe you were a spy or something. But what would you be spying on? I didn't know. Then I remembered hearing we have a visitor who is definitely not a spy. Anyway, I'm Wilbur. Welcome to Island. Enjoy your non-spying stay." End quote. E. Missing fence. In one of the trailers, a white picket fence can be seen. This fence was not available upon the game's release, and as of the latest update, there is still no such fence available. Level 8. The Abyss. 56. Animal Crossing takes place in Purgatory. The presence of the Eureka, Wisp, the gravestone items, the gyroid Haniwas, etc., all point to a very spiritual plane of existence wherein the laws of nature are not followed by the flora or fauna either. Is the village or island the waiting room for the player and villagers before they pass on? The player character is relatively young, even being referred to as a child by other characters, and the player regularly receives letters and packages from a mom. Could this be the mother sending gifts from heaven or leaving gifts at their child's grave, pained by the fact they will never actually receive them? Could the letters from Mom or the other villagers actually be the voices of friends and loved ones standing over your grave and speaking to you, mentioning that they're thinking of you and wishing you the best, or just idly talking to fill the dead air? Pun intended. You can get on a train or a plane and travel to a friend's town, but it's essentially the same waiting room as your own. That's why the world is giant. infinite even, for the multitudes of similar souls trapped in purgatory. Is Tom Nook actually an angel or celestial being in charge of teaching the player life lessons in order to help them overcome their earthly trials and tribulations? 57. Night Clowns, Villager Phrases. New Horizons released in a new era of video games that tend to be more in tune with internet culture. As such, New Horizons has some slightly off-kilter dialogue that aligns more closely with the oddball humor often found on the internet. This can manifest in the way jock villagers may sometimes tell you how, quote, no one could hear them scream from the basement from pain. Dialogue like this is sort of eccentric in a slightly different way that is standard from the series, but Animal Crossing is simply eccentric anyways, especially in the earliest games. So this isn't too odd, right? Well, sometimes if you convince a character in your campsite to replace a villager in your town, the former will mention that the other was already thinking of moving out. Why? Because of the night clowns. Now, you may say, what? No one talks much about the night clowns, but they are enough to supposedly motivate a villager to move out once the opportunity arises. Clowns and jesters can be known for capriciousness, and, as a result of pop culture like the Joker, or invoking the image of the jester, which evokes darker symbolism over how death is often presented in the garb of a jester, both have earned a negative connotation throughout the years. Is the Grim Reaper of the Animal Crossing world coming garbed in the medieval jester costume to reap the wayward souls no longer fit to exist in the given realm? Could this be a nod to the more real-world occurrence of the 2016 clown sightings and attacks, wherein people would dress as evil clowns and appear, generally, at night? This baffles players to this day, who have to ask, do the night clowns have any connection to Pietro, a clown-based sheep or ram? The fact that this question is unanswered to this day makes it so much worse. It might give you second thoughts about playing at night, among other things. 58. Animal Shootout. Animal Shootout was one of those classic gaming urban legends from very early in the franchise, back during the days of the GameCube game. The idea was that you could actually unlock an M-rated game within Animal Crossing that would allow you to brutally dispatch the characters in the game with your axe. While the methods varied, they usually involved finding a way to break into Tom Nook's shop at night, which would give you the ability to commit crimes. From that point onwards, you would be playing Animal Shootout, being able to kill and steal. There was also another guide around the same time that told people you could turn the game into one that was more similar to Silent Hill than a cute Nintendo game. There is no way to enter Tom Nook's shop at night, except the Japanese exclusive Dobutsu no Mori E+, which is achieved by hitting the building with your axe. This will convince Tom Nook to begrudgingly let you in, at the cost of increased prices and decreased profit. If there was a way to break into Tom Nook's shop, perhaps it could be done in E+. Otherwise, what real benefit is there to entering Nook's shop at night anyways? 59. Where does Gulliver really come from? Another theory about Gulliver states that he is actually an alien. Gulliver first appears in the Japanese exclusive Animal Forest, the first game in the Animal Crossing series. Since this title was never released outside of Japan, it was never translated into English. However, when the player speaks to Gulliver in that game, he's one of the only characters who can respond in fluent English. Even more interesting is Gulliver's appearance in Wild World and City Folk, wherein he does not don his normal sailor garb, but instead he's dressed as an astronaut. He can also be seen piloting an actual UFO. Players can shoot his UFO down with a slingshot and help him repair it after he crash lands by finding 5 UFO parts scattered around their village. In the Animal Crossing Wild World movie, Dobutsu no Mori, Gulliver crashes his UFO and claims he is an alien to the villagers, garnering their help. However, Gulliver is revealed to be not an alien when actual aliens appear, although the villagers still believe him. What if Gulliver has actually had contact with these aliens, or is actually one in disguise? Gulliver could be quoted as saying, "No, don't take me back to outer space. It's cold and dark and..." Huh? Option A, Gulliver is a normal villager that has been previously captured, tracked, or is otherwise under the control of the aliens. His job is to investigate local areas of sentient life in order to gather intel. He utilizes a common ploy: appear lost, hurt, and harmless to gain their empathy and trust. We also never see who picks him up after he loiters around all day. Option B: he is actually an alien in disguise and is similarly gathering intel on our world. That is why he speaks in English in the Japanese iterations in order to further distinguish his language and culture from theirs. Either way, Gulliver's origins are murky at best. 60. The Wii U game. The Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival for Wii U game sees all of the Animal Crossing characters, or rather, the ones that are available as amiibo, are able to be utilized in many board game-based games and activities in this spin-off world. In other words, this is just one iteration in which the characters of the Animal Crossing universe are true commodities, being bought and sold for a seemingly world-breaking game that sees them as mere pawns and avatars for the audience's amusement and are generally sold and acknowledged as such, merely artificial beings. 61. 64DD. The 64DD was a peripheral for the Nintendo 64 that was meant to give the system far more features and capabilities. This peripheral would have given the Nintendo 64 a real-time clock and the ability to connect to the internet. The only problem was, due to delays, it was released very late into the Nintendo 64's run. For reference, the Nintendo 64 launched in 1996, and the 64DD released in 1999. And it was only available in Japan with only a reported 15,000 units being sold. As a result, it was a total failure. It was discontinued in 2001, and Animal Forest would be released in Japan in April 2001 as the standard N64 cartridge. This is significant to Animal Crossing because the failure of the 64DD affected the entire nature of the series itself. Before, Animal Crossing was basically still Animal Crossing, but it was a game planned for the 64DD. This game was going to be a Diablo-based cooperative RPG game that featured a real-time clock. That meant players would have been crawling through dungeons, and the gameplay would have had a more prominent focus on multiplayer. The animal characters would have even had different sleep cycles. For example, wolf NPCs would have been entirely nocturnal. Here are some choice quotes about the intended gameplay and other mechanics. At that point, we had discussions about things like, how many floors could we have in a dungeon? How should items be placed? There wasn't even a hint of being able to have conversations with animals at the time. At that time, what were the animals like? You just issued commands to them with simple button presses. The system was set up so that each player had their own animals at their disposal. That is somewhat RPG-like, isn't it? Having your teammates falling behind you. And so on and so forth. The N64 without the peripheral would have never had the capability for this, and as the device was performing poorly in sales, a lot of features had to be trimmed down. For example, the real-time clock was now something that the player had to set themselves. Animal Forest released for the N64 and was localized later that December for the GameCube, allowing it that real-time clock. 62. Humans are going extinct. Other than the player character, their friends that are similarly the token human characters of their own islands or villages, and the player's unseen parents, why don't we see other humans? Fans have long speculated that humans are, as a species, going extinct. What has happened? A virus or deadly illness is sweeping through the human population, and children, the genetic future of the human race, are being sent to these isolated towns or islands far away from other human civilization to escape similar contamination. The reason the player can visit their friends is because they are living in similarly isolated locations, possibly set up by the government or another figure. As a side note to this, could this be something akin to the world of Sweet Tooth, where some biological experiment gone awry has led to human-animal hybrids, save for a select few? In this world, the animals are the preeminent species, with humans being the token oddity. B. Perhaps replace the deadly virus with a global war, famine, or nuclear fallout, and the next generation is sent to artificial pockets that have been created to be free of the depravity and pestilence plaguing the planet. C. It's not so much that humans are going extinct, but that each Animal Crossing town or village is a carefully curated package experience that people can sign up for and experience. The first games are styled for hard workers wishing to live in an idealized village with cute creatures. Later installments see you try your hand at a stress-free bid as the mayor where nothing ill truly befalls you and you are unable to be deposed. New Horizons sees you take even more control while new activities or updates are constantly added and brought to the island to keep you entertained. Now, the question becomes as to whether this is an artificial world, an elysium of technology that has allowed its creation, or a mere virtual reality where the player sits in a bed or pod synced up to this bright world. 63. Inherent negative presence, most felt at night. Animal Crossing, especially in the earlier games, actively discouraged you from playing at night in many ways. There's much less to do at night for one, and the hourly music can be somewhat unsettling. The theory here is that, not only is Animal Crossing not meant to be played at night, that you are not supposed to play at night, and that there is a negative presence or aura there to discourage it. It is to be noted that this negative presence is seemingly almost absent from New Horizons because of some new anti-frustration features which lowers the disadvantages of playing at night. Regardless, some new pieces of dialogue in the game do make some reference to the idea that playing at night is maybe not the best idea. It could be argued that, in the early games, the negative presence is always there and it is only most noticeable at night because it is generally emptier and there is less to do. The weird atmosphere in the earlier games can be attributed to some features which have been noticeably phased out as the franchise tries to appeal to more people. It is worth mentioning that New Horizons seems to not feature as much of a negative aura as past games, and it is the only game so far to not feature gyroids, and a number of other items that have been mainstays so far in the game's development cycle. Perhaps Darren King's assessment of the game's ability to capture, quote, the lovely melancholy of pointless preambulation, end quote, as you, isolated in your quiet little world, even devoid of the pixelated artificial creatures you have befriended, disappear into the inky blackness. 64. Artificial World. Another piece of dialogue, unique to lazy villagers, is the fourth wall-breaking conversation that outright comments upon the impractical laws and physics of the game. Here is the dialogue from Sherb. There's a weird rumor going round. Some folks, they're saying none of this is real. None of it. And they say the island is just a game, and everything we say, or do, is just to amuse somebody else. And, I don't know, I kinda maybe believe it. So many things would make more sense, you know? Have you ever thought that trees grow way too fast? And ain't it weird that trees all have 3 kinds of wood? And have you ever noticed there's pretty music everywhere? It's great, but it's weird. And does Tom Nook make any kind of sense to you? Yeah, I'll buy your seashell so you can give me back my own money to pay off a house I'm selling to you. It's all so obvious. Our lives are fake. We all should have saw a long time ago. A long old time ago. I'm joking. It's a joke. Nobody said that. You ought to see the look on your face. I ate 6 bags of chips last night and fell asleep with the TV on. I had real weird dreams. Gee, thanks, Sherb. Are the villagers AI that have slowly become self-aware, questioning their existence in this fabricated world? Or are they trapped here, forced to play a part in your little world for your amusement? 65. What are the villagers? Why is the player there? The villagers, ranging from robots, plushies, to seemingly biological-looking anthropomorphic animals, raise many questions. What exactly are they, and why are they here? Let's begin with their personalities, or, rather, their progressive lack thereof. All villagers can be divided into 8 personalities to date: cranky, jock, lazy, and smug, which are unique to male villagers, and snooty, peppy, normal, and big sister, sisterly, uchi, which are unique to female villagers. In older games, villagers had much more unique dialogue that fell under their personality types and were a good deal more rude before warming up to the player, although some personality-based dialogue was still repeated. In New Horizons, the lack of unique or varied dialogue is painfully obvious. Talking to multiple villagers of the same personality type will draw from the same bank of phrases, word per word, until some players just stop speaking to them because nothing is different, other than a villager unique catchphrase at the end. And what of the NPCs, such as Nook, Sahara, or Orville, for example? Their dialogue is, at times, frustratingly long and repetitive. They have no variance but to repeat what they are able to do for you, such as describing the prices and options of each rug they sell every time you wish to make a purchase, or repeating the preparations necessary for every flight. Sure, the NPCs are more unique in that they have differing dialogue, but only based on the event or job that they have. There are a few possibilities here. A. All characters were humans but were experimented upon and morphed into animals. Personalities, over time, were impressed upon them. The original mean, cranky villagers were the result of a mix of retaining some of their original personality and the effects of trying to engineer personality types. Over time, they are made more uniform and compliant, which we see in Animal Crossing New Horizons. B. The villagers are merely actors in suits. Zipper with his, Zipper, the robots, Hopkins, etc., all become more plausible with the idea that they are in suits. They are actors, cast characters, designed to give you the experience as the mayor or resident in a fictional role-play community. They are given a suit, a name, a personality, and lines to memorize. C. They are androids or beings a la Westworld that are constantly reset and adapted to new personalities and jobs. They are lifelike because the technology has reached that capability. You come to a world where you can roleplay without repercussions. Constantly assault a villager with a net? They'll remark on it, but nothing will happen to you. Be kind? They'll thank you for it. Every time you log off, you leave the simulation, returning to your normal life until you return again. We know time does pass, and they remember your absence. On this, taking the latest game, New Horizons, say you become best friends with a villager, earning unique dialogue and interactions, as well as their photo. Now, say you kick that villager out, or otherwise get them to leave the island. They say how they'll miss you, and so on and so forth, and then they leave. Then, say you bring them back. They will not remember you, and you will have to start from the ground up of earning their trust and building back their relationship. What has happened here? Have they been reset, refurbished, reprogrammed, and memory wiped between sessions so that someone else can use them, or they must reset the error that caused the player to want them to leave in the first place? Interestingly, if your friend or a player you interact with through the multiplayer function takes your player that's leaving while in boxes, they will still remember you. Perhaps they were worthy of retaining their current code without being reset because they were still desirable. Just to note, this may also be plausible if you assume they are all actors, as a new actor in the suit now replaces them. 2. This also helps to explain their programmed personality, with phrases that are word-by-word copies and how they can all have the same stock memories of parents or their childhood because it is real to them. 3. Or perhaps the souls inside the gyroids are implanted within these artificial bodies. D. All the villagers are yokai or spirits that help the player come to terms with their death, allowing them to leave the purgatory of the Animal Crossing world. Okay, let's take a step back. To help understand the villagers more, let's look at the player, or rather, the players. Each island features a Tom Nook, Nooklings, Blathers, etc. at the same time they exist on your island, as well as any villagers that you have in common, across millions of islands. How is that possible, save for actors donning company-made suits or being copied artificial constructs? Is this world just for commercial gain and entertainment purposes, like Westworld? Or is it a societal simulation, an experiment, like an Ender's Game or The Maze Runner, wherein a chosen person is given the freedom to experiment and interact with the world around them for sustainable reasons? Perhaps you are here because you have been kidnapped by the aliens, and they have created a human zoo, populated by similarly abducted players and given simulated environments from which the aliens can learn more about us, or just to be entertained themselves. And that concludes the Animal Crossing Iceberg. I think I may be heading back to Pokemon for a Mystery Dungeon inspired iceberg next time. After that, who knows? Maybe a little Halo, Gears of War, or Zelda to spice it up a bit. If there's something you'd like to see me take a stab at, let me know in a comment below. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a spiffy day.